behalf of all of you and everyone at the Academy, I extend a warm welcome to Professor Ashish Nandy, a distinguished critic, social theorist, a political psychologist. Sir, I am glad to welcome you to deliver this year's Samvatsar lecture. As many of you would know, that Samvatsar lecture, or as the name suggests, annual lecture delivered by distinguished writer or a creative thinker who has thorough understanding of Indian literature and culture. Those lectures have more often betrayed a deep concern for values, open up new vistas of thinking regarding literature, literary movements, trends and society at large, and at times about classics of the land or immortal literature, or even about the new paths available in literary creations and criticism. Many have adorned this very platform and delivered stellar lectures. There are many, and I can only mention a few. S.H. Vasayan at Agya, K. Shivaram Karant, Umar Shankar Joshi, K.R. Srinivas Iyengar, Anada Shankar Ray, Vidyanivas Mishra, Sitakant Mahapatra, Govind Chandra Pandey, U.R. Anantamurthy, Vinda Karandikar, Ale Ahmad Surur, Nirmal Verma, M.T. Vasudevan Nair, Girish Karnad, Manoj Das, Amitav Ghosh, Karan Singh, Surjit Patar, K. Ayappa Panikar, Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam, and Balchandra Nemade, to name a few. But more than the names, what they spoke lingers for a year, very long time, but beyond the generations of listeners who were fortunate to listen to them live and person. Born in 1937 in Bhagalpur, Dr. Ashish Nandy obtained master's degree in sociology from Nagpur and a doctorate in psychology from Gujarat University. With his incisive precision and astute analytical abilities, Dr. Nandy has, over the past 4 decades, remarkable critiques on wide-ranging topics from European colonialism and secularism, from Hindutva to science and technology, from cosmopolitanism to poverty, to name a few. Dr. Nandy has also provided original historical profile of India's commercial cinema. Dr. Nandy is a senior honorary fellow at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, New Delhi, and he was the former director of the center, and he was also the chairperson of the Committee for Cultural Choices and Global Futures. He is a recipient of Fukuoka Asian Cultural Prize in 2007. Dr. Nandy was featured among the top 100 public intellectuals poll of the Foreign Policy magazine. Dr. Nandy has co-authored a number of human rights reports. Dr. Nandy has over 25 titles to his credit, apart from numerous essays and articles. With these few words, I once again welcome Dr. Ashish Nandy ji to deliver this year's annual lecture. Before I hand over the mic, I request President Sahitya Academy to welcome the guest with a bouquet of flowers.
Though I have a large draft, I must say at the beginning that I'm not going to read it. So don't be afraid. I will make some very simple points very simply and directly, and I hope some of the implications of it will be obvious to you. Before starting, I must thank the Academy for inviting me here. I am grateful, and this gives me a chance to meet many old friends. Some of the faces I see have been known to me for years, and I feel very honored to be addressing them here today. This is on cultural diversity. Do we protect cultural diversity, or does cultural diversity protect us? That is the basic issue. To pick up this issue and make some sense of it, I should say at the beginning that some of the things I would say will not be very pleasant. Many of the choices we have made as persons, as cultures, or as a society, or as even as a nation state, have enjoyed much popular support, and it seems to represent the consensus of the Indian people. But there is in the world no free lunch. Everything, human beings have never innovated an idea or an institutional system which is perfect. Whatever looks perfect, ultimately shows itself to be rather transient. So please keep that in mind. Everybody has his favorite values in this world, but we have to learn that even values are changeable. All of us are in some sense, particularly the literary figures, whether they know or not, are in search of yoga dharma, ethics appropriate for our times, and that is a very hard choice. I have always found that those writings of mine become very controversial, and this always surprises me, which people know that I am raising issues which are not alien. Everybody knows them. But these happen to be issues and problems which everybody tries to deny exist. And therefore, people like to believe they don't exist. And so it's not that I am saying something very strange. What I am going to say is known to you. I only hope that by putting it in front of you on the table openly, I make it more possible to debate them and perhaps move towards a world which can transcend the contradictions in this society. The attack on cultural diversity in the world, I suspect, comes from 6 sources. There may be more, but I have found 6 major sources of attack. First, and one of the most important of this, is a contribution of 19th century Europe, though its origins can be traced to even 17th century. Most of the problems I am going to talk about is a problem of which were kind of created by the impact of the modern world on us. This is the way we have to handle with this. Anyway, what I was trying to say is this, that from 18th century began search for a different way of looking at time itself. Our concept of time has been shaped now by this contradiction between the post-enlightenment concept of time in Europe, dominant way of looking at it, and other concepts of time with which we have lived and societies like us have lived. There were differences among these societies, but they were not unmanageable. But in the case of Europe, it became a different story because Europe also colonized us. For instance, to give the most best-known examples of this, in 19th century, theories of social change all have an implicit stages of history built into them. Human beings have always looked at cultural differences, social differences, differences in environmental situations, difference in political systems along 2 planes. Primarily, a synchronic plane. You are different from me, I am different from you, he is different from you also. But we are 3 different kinds on the synchronic plane, that means on the horizontal plane. In 18th century onwards, began this tendency to convert these differences into a vertical plane, making it not synchronic to diachronic, horizontal to perpendicular. So if you are different, we do not anymore say, if cultures are now different, our first instinct now is not to say that they are different. First instinct is say, no, all human beings are the same, but that culture is the same as ours, but it is not exactly what I am today, what the culture I was yesterday. Or alternatively, you say that culture is not different from us, it is what we will become tomorrow. So, what was a cultural difference is converted into a diachronic historical chronological difference. That we are going the way other countries have gone before, we are catching up. Whether it is development, whether it is political system, whether it is modernization, whether it is social change of any kinds, are all now mapped on a diachronic level. People are rising. So, in one sense, half the societies in the world, maybe more than half, 3/4 of the world, seem to be constantly crawling their way up an inclined plane of history. We are going through historical stages. And other societies seem, a smaller number of societies, seem to be there on the hilltop, who are from them advising us how to climb the hill. That's the meaning of progress. That's the meaning of political change, democratization. That's the meaning of economic development, and so on and so forth. Ivan Illich said somewhere that it took 20 years for 2 billion people in the world to learn that they were underdeveloped. Nobody thought of themselves as underdeveloped, they had to be taught that. Now, this is the case with all of us. So, I often say that the two countries, China and India, between them 40% of the world, 1 billion Chinese and 1 billion Indians, no longer go to heaven when they have lived a good life, moral life. They go to New York. So that is the situation. Then you live a good life. If you are an ethical person, you don't go to heaven, you go to New York next birth. So this is our goal, because New York is what is the capital of another world, which we are aspiring to join. And from that world, we look as if we are also kind of apprentice nation states who are learning how to be like them. So they are kind of by definition our consultants and experts. And we are perpetually like students, understudies, trying to catch up. That's the meaning of that. So that's number one. Because this is a sure prescription for cultural suicide, I feel. Because your culture no longer has any intrinsic validity. It is something which you have to transcend to be like somebody else. To give a telling example, Friedrich Engels, lifelong companion of Marx, when he heard that France had conquered Algeria, wrote in a letter to Marx, "Good that Algeria has been conquered by France, because now it will join civilization." The Algerian civilization was at least as old as France, if not older. It was older probably. But that was the concept, because center of civilization has shifted, the pivot has moved. That's the way it was. So it is not that only the arch conservatives think of white supremacy. This is built in the process. This is built into the knowledge systems of the West throughout. Two, I've already mentioned that development is one area also where this diachronic principle works. But development has also given us a way of looking at culture. Now the priority and emphasis of development is such, nobody talks of social change anymore. Nobody talks of economic growth. People talk of development, that there is a difference. Economic growth and social change and boring old-fashioned concept. Development is a ruling mantra of the world. I mean, a few million people just live on the idea of development. If you count the number of development economists, the students who are taught in management institution, development, what development is, and so on and so forth, it's a huge mass of people. At one time, there were a number of people who talked of other kinds of development. In India, we talked about rural development, decentralized development. In Africa, they talked of Uzama. In Latin America, they talked of ethno-development. Some talked of alternative development. And so on. And now the buzzword is sustainable development. But in the long run, none of them have survived. Only the development with capital D has survived, the old orthodox, old-style development. I would have thought by this time everybody knows how to develop because the mechanics are known. But every day we are producing thousands of people who are specialists on development, whose job is to give consultancy on development, who go to other countries, have development experts and so on and so forth. So development itself has become a huge vested interest of a very large section of the global knowledge system, expertise in knowledge system. So in developmental logic, the culture is looked like something which is waiting to be engineered by us. It has taught us an extremely arrogant expression that we must keep what is good in our culture and we must reject the bad. Now, what is bad in culture? I think I would have thought everybody who lives in the culture knows what is bad or can judge it for themselves. But the argument goes that what is good for development is good for the society, and what is bad for development is bad for society. This prioritization of development over culture allows us to eliminate one by one those parts of the culture which are not utilitarian, which cannot be easily commercialized, which are seen as something which the country should shed for the sake of efficiency and better commercial exploitation. I mean, it strikes me that I am wearing a Chinese Mandarin jacket which was gifted to me by a Chinese friend of mine. When I went to a shop, she took me to a shop in Shanghai to show it to me. It turned out to be the only handloom place where you could get handloom clothes. And this is quite rough. It's not as good as many of the handloom stuff we produce. And accidentally, by mistake, the shop assistant gave me the bill first, and before she could snatch it from my hand and make the payment. But in this moment, I could see that this is costlier than silk, because in whole of that part, central China, there are no other shop which produces this, handlooms. And this shop only produces blue garments of various shades of blue. It's called indigo, and it was established by a Japanese woman who found that all the handloom shops were handlooms were closing one by one. And she ran the shop for many years before she became very old, went back to Japan, leaving the shop to the workers at Indigo, and this. So the scarcity now has raised the price. Handloom clothing is very, very expensive there. Because it has no utilitarian value. It has lost the game. And it is going to be the case in India too, because increasingly we think that all these subsidies to khadi and handloom and all, these are economically unsupportable, and we should give full flow to the mills so that the success Bangladesh or Sri Lanka has attained in garment export, or China has attained in garment export, we should also join the game. So there is one part of the story. Certain kind of craft tradition are being destroyed, lock, stock and barrel, without anybody shedding tears for them. Third, cultural diversity is also destroyed by high levels of uprootedness and mobility. This is because cultures in our times, and particularly in societies like this, has been traditionally organized often around religions. And religions in this part of the world, irrespective of what religion it is, has always been a decentralized religion. They were in India and whole of South Asia for that matter, religion there was defined by region, language and even location. For example, Hinduism, every village has its village gods and goddesses, family gods and goddesses, personal gods and goddesses, Ishtadeva and Ishtadevi. So it varies. And then also it differs by sects. So even a village probably has a multiplicity and plurality of gods and goddesses. But suppose uprooting and mobility, for various reasons, it can be due to the kind of uprooting that took place in the wake of partition, or it could be even the increasing pull of better opportunities in another state, in another place, in India. But say for instance, if a Malayali is going to Assam with his concept of Hinduism, he has nobody to share it, except maybe few Malays scattered thereabout, and that will not look like Hinduism to the Assamese. So to make sense in this kind of context, you are permanently looking for a version of Hinduism that will make sense to your neighbors, people you work with, or people you work for. That is a kind of almost an imperative, because you also want to make sense to them and you want to take your family into religious festivals and so on and so forth. So what happens is this, that gradually you are pushed to opt for a version of Hinduism which you can carry with you from over geographical distances and geographical cultural differences. So your Malayali Hinduism just will not do. So you want to have something which will allow you to identify with other Hindus in the locality you are located, particularly in metropolitan cities and so on and so forth. You always are looking for that. And that increasingly pushes you to a version of Hinduism which is heavily dependent on classical texts and the core religious texts, Vedas and Upanishads, for example. But that was not the predominant mode of Hinduism till even 50 years ago. Till 50 years ago, they would not have made this kind of thing, would not have made sense except for a small group of scholars and experts. Because this local connection was absolutely crucial. That gave sense to it. And incidentally, that also makes another difficulty, because gradually that emphasis on the Sanskrit versions of Vedas and Upanishads, and even of the Puranas, Ramayana and Mahabharata, reduces the rich variety of experience that is available in the local versions of Mahabharata and Ramayana, in the language versions of Bhasha versions of that, language versions of Ramayana and Mahabharata, and that was the thing which ensured the continuity of culture. In fact, two of the greatest sons of India, Gandhi and Tagore, both recognized that, mind you, Tagore was a Brahmo, and the Brahmo reformist sect went back to Vedas and Upanishads. So it must have been very painful for him to acknowledge this. They were both in agreement that the source of Indian unity and the survival of India as a unified entity depended not on Vedas and Upanishads, but on the medieval sons, Nanak, Kabir, Bulle Shah, Lalan, and so on, so on, the whole lot of them, whole series of them, and that is a very significant difference. Now, it might seem very odd thing to say that, because we are now become accustomed to saying that our origins of civilization was with Vedas and Upanishads, maybe, but that is not the origins of the unified entity called not only India but Jambudip, Bharatvarsha, the Indic civilization, the civilization that extends from southern Vietnam all the way to Asia Minor, West Asia, because the civilization and nation state are not coterminous. In that civilizational concept of India, our neighbors also are a part and parcel of the civilization. Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. It is that dynamic entity, that differences, that defined us. But that is not available. Only last year I heard this thing that there are so many of these versions of Ramayana and Mahabharata. They provide a different kind of perspective to the local culture, local belief systems, and define local identities. Only last year I had this story that which I was looking for something, that Indian concept of enmity. In Indian civilization, enmity is very differently defined. In the Mahabharata, you will find that after the day's battle at Kurukshetra, in the evening, the soldiers visited each other, went to the opposite sides and discussed how happy they were in earlier days when there was no battle. That idea, it's so pronounced. So that gives a different context to enmity. And somebody told me about an episode in Yakshagana, in Kannada, where when the Setu was built to Lanka by Banarsena, for the sthapana of the Setu, the ritual establishment of the bridge and the consecration of the bridge, you needed a Brahmin to come and do the puja. And that area, there was no Brahmin except Ravan. So they invited Ravan to come and do the puja. Now, it seems Ravan came in disguise. But everybody knew that Ravan was only Brahman there, so their disguise couldn't have held. He did the puja because he was a man of honor also. As a Brahman, he was bound to do the puja. And went back. Neither was he touched, nor did he take advantage of it in any other way. That's the concept of enmity. There is a different kind of binding. Arjuna and Karna, you can see there's a twist always there. And enmity is not as in the West, where evil is much more concrete and real. Here, there are continuities. There are continuities. That is why our heroes are also androgynous. Not only continuity over enmity, continuity over gender boundaries. You are not fully masculine unless you have hosted the femininity in your masculinity. You are not fully feminine unless you have hosted something of masculine in your femininity. It is that androgynous shift, and so that this, I mean, I'm not only Ardhanashwar, it can be traced all the way down from theology to Bombay cinema, earlier heroes, and you will find the same thing. Devdas is a good example of what I'm saying. Anyway, so that's the way that. So there is this. Now, uprooting and mobility is steamrolling our religious beliefs also into a monolithic fold. The hermeneutic freedom which you had is no longer available to you. I consider M.F. Hussain perhaps the most creative interpreter of Hindu theogony. Yeah. It is not an accident. It is not an accident. And it is not negated by whatever accusations people made. He remains that. Exactly as one of the finest artists in Pakistan, Chib, he also always painted Hindu gods and goddesses. This is the custom. This has been the tradition. And this tradition has remained intact for at least 1,000 years. I know. We are losing that. It is becoming, Hinduism is now for Hindus, Islam is for Muslims, and Sikhism is for the Sikhs. But if you go to Amritsar and go to Golden Knot Temple, you will find on a normal day, that is when it is not a Sikh festivity, a majority of the pilgrims are non-Sikhs. And if you go to Ajmer Sharif, on a day which is not a Islamic festival, majority of the pilgrims are non-Muslim. And in Mahim there is a church which is supposed to be very potent. There, more than 90% of the pilgrims are non-Christian. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis, everybody goes there. So this is our tradition. And that freedom, that tradition is doing clear-cut lines. These clear-cut lines had come because every religion which is not organized the way religions are organized in Semitic creeds and in Europe, and particularly in Protestant Christianity, is seen as backward. In the case of Hinduism, is seen as pagan, something to be embarrassed about. You should have, that is the way to have. That is the way to have self-respect. That is why the non-resident Indians in the first world are the most articulate about this, because they go and see that their religion is not exclusive, not exclusive enough. It is inclusive. I mean, and that doesn't make sense to them. I was taken once to a few Buddhist temples in Sri Lanka at the height of the civil war by Nilan Tiruchelvam before his assassination. He was assassinated by own people, by the LTTE. And he wanted me to see the fact that every campus of every Buddhist temple, there is a Hindu temple. And he took me to two of them, and one of them, he also asked people that they were coming to offer puja. They were mostly parents of Sinhala soldiers going to the north to fight the Tamil LTTE, Hindus, and they came to the Hindu temple. So Nilan asked them why they are, for my sake, that why do this. He knew what the answer would be. And they said, most of them said, not all, but most of them said, actually, these Buddhist gods are too austere and otherworldly. They don't listen to you at all. The Hindu gods, if you may take a vow here, they will sincerely protect your son in the battle. So that's the way it goes. But I am sure their two lines have been drawn now, and increasingly this will become things of the past. I have no doubt about that. Fourth, cultural diversity is also disliked by all nation states. Whatever they might say officially, whatever they might say publicly, all nation states try to curtail cultural diversity. Because cultural diversity makes it more difficult to rule, more difficult to manage, difficult to administer. It is no accident that what we call officially, what stands for Hinduism in juridical terms, in law, was based on choice made by a single person in Fort William College. Mrityunjay Tarkalankar, a person declared that Manu Samhita is the authentic Hindu law-giving text. And East India Company accepted it. But there were other Hindu texts which define law. And one proof of that is this, that when Ram Mohan Rai fought against Sati, and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar fought against child marriage and for widow remarriage, Vidyasagar openly depended on Parasar Sutra. He argued on the basis of Parasar Sutra. And this was because this was a public debate where this debate took place. And he was declared the winner. He was declared the winner of the debate. And so even in 1860s, it was accepted that there were multiple texts. But the state was never happy with it. And now Manu Samhita has become the authentic law-defining text in classical Hinduism. So there is this part of the story also. And this is the case with all states. The states want a clear-cut thing. You cannot do with this 1500 language which India started. Now there are 1200. There are 1200 plus languages. Now a state cannot deal with it, so it has defined 30 national languages, 2 official languages, and say unofficial probably another 1,000 or whatever, and they're forgotten, half-forgotten languages. You know, they are very uncomfortable with it. So this is the nature of state. Because the reason is this, nation state, which means one nation, one state. That is not the case in India. It should be actually multiple nations, but we don't have nations. Truly speaking, this is not a nation-oriented thing. This is not a nation. This is not an ethnic group. This is not an ethnic. Indians are not an ethnic group. It is not one single nation. It is a country of communities. It is a country of communities. And it is this communities share a culture which gives us uniqueness. That is why Tagore and Gandhi both traced to the medieval India. Because they cut across the divisions of religion and sects. Religion, sects and languages. They cut across that. And that created that feeling that there is something common amongst us. And many people still retain it who are outside India. You know, I was very surprised that as late in the late 1990s, NDTV went to Pakistan in Lahore to interview some people on certain things. You know, and they were interviewing a Pakistani